The sound of cicadas penetrated through the diner windows, their high-pitched chorus filling every corner of the restaurant with an inescapable wall of noise. UFO mugs, chipped and grinning, lined the shelves like a monument to tourist kitsch. Peter Certendirk half-heartedly dissected a slice of pie that tasted like cardboard and artificial cherry, wondering if this was what his journalism degree had prepared him for. He looked up as Luann Masters slid into the booth opposite him. Her apron, slightly stained with coffee and what might have been ketchup, had a small, hand-stitched alien peeking from its pocket, a charming, if unsettling touch that suggested either a sense of humor or complete delusion. Without a word, she dropped a thick manila envelope beside his plate. "They owe me, Mr. Certendirk," Luann said, her voice flat and devoid of theatrics. "And my boy, they owe us big time." Peter opened the envelope with the resigned air of someone who'd interviewed Bigfoot hunters and cattle mutilation experts for 3 years running. Inside, he found medical scans with unidentifiable foreign tissue stamped in red ink, DNA readouts flagged inconclusive in handwriting that seemed more like scribbled notes than official documentation from a reputable medical facility, and, most impressively, a local court filing that listed the father as unknown species. There were also detailed schematics covered in mathematical equations that made Peter's head spin just looking at them. And finally, a photo of her son, Liam, a perfectly normal-looking kid, maybe 7 or 8, with bright eyes and a thoughtful expression. No green skin, no extra fingers, no antenna, just a boy who looked like his favorite food was pancakes. "They thought they could fly off and leave me holding the bag," Luann continued, refilling his coffee without being asked. A waitress habit that apparently died hard. Well, they didn't count on Roswell County Family Court. Peter studied the court documents. Someone had actually filed this. Someone had walked into a courthouse and demanded child support from extraterrestrials. "Can I meet Liam? Pop over to my trailer after dinner. Kid'll be done with his homework by then." Homework, Peter repeated, because in his experience, the children of conspiracy theorists were usually homeschooled in subjects like Government Cover-Ups 101. "Math," Luann said with a shrug. "Kid's good at math." Liam Masters sat at the kitchen table of their double-wide trailer, surrounded by papers covered in equations and diagrams that made Peter's liberal arts brain feel inadequate. Scattered between the mathematical chaos were plastic dinosaurs, a T-Rex locked in eternal battle with a Triceratops near what looked like differential calculus. Luann made the introductions with the casual efficiency of a waitress who'd spent years managing busy tables, then busied herself making coffee while Peter and her son sized each other up. The boy looked up when they entered, his eyes holding an intensity that seemed too old for his face. "You're the journalist," he said. It wasn't a question. Peter flipped through the stacks of drawings and schematics, trying to make sense of symbols that looked like they belonged in a physics textbook. "Did you draw all these?" Liam nodded, then picked up the T-Rex and made it stomp across his homework. "Did you know Tyrannosaurus rex had forward-facing eyes for binocular depth perception, which suggests they were active predators rather than scavengers? Their bite force was estimated at 12,800 pounds per square inch." Peter blinked. "That's very specific for a 7-year-old. "I'm 8, Liam corrected, then added casually. "I hear the stars singing sometimes. They sound sad. I'm trying to figure out how to fix it." Before Peter could process that statement, his phone rang. Toby's voice crackled through the speaker, urgent and paranoid. "Pete, hush payments. Luann's hospital bills were covered by an anonymous source. Big money. Untraceable." The line went quiet for a moment, then Toby's voice returned, spooked. "I gotta go. They're watching the digital trail." The call ended abruptly. Peter looked at Luann, who was making coffee like nothing had happened. "Luann," Peter said carefully, "one of my sources said that someone anonymously paid your hospital bills from when Liam was born. Do you know anything about that?" "Hospital said Medicaid covered it," she shrugged. I didn't argue. Who argues with free? Peter scribbled notes onto his pad. "Did you ever receive any paperwork?" She shook her head. "Not that I remember." Peter asked, "You think you could look around for them?" "From 8 years ago?" Her tone more than suggested that she wouldn't be doing that. "Mom doesn't sleep much," he said matter-of-factly. "The visitors check on me at night. She worries they'll take me away again." "Again?" Peter asked. I don't remember the first time, Liam said, lining up his dinosaurs with military precision. But Mom does. Peter looked at Luan with concern. She wiped away a tear before Liam could see it. What happens when they take you? Peter asked. Liam shrugged. I can't remember. His attention returned to the dinosaurs. Liam, unnervingly calm for a kid who just revealed he'd been abducted by UFOs, wished Peter luck with his story as he prepared to leave. At the courthouse the next morning, Peter found the clerk who'd processed Luan's filing. She was a tired-looking woman with reading glasses hanging from a beaded chain. Oh, I remember that one, she chuckled. Filed it herself. Judge laughed her clean out of the courtroom. Poor thing looked so determined, too. Her expression sobered. That night, though, a couple of suits showed up, real quiet, real serious. Wanted to see the filing and talk to the judge. Government? Didn't say. But they had that look, like they were used to getting what they wanted. The next day, I found the paperwork ready to be filed into the archives as if it had been processed and closed. The judge said that he reconsidered her claims, but there was nothing that he could do to help her. Back at his motel, Peter called his editor. Mary Clatch's voice boomed through the phone with the enthusiasm of someone who'd built a career on other people's delusions. Now that is juicy as hell, Pete. You get me pictures of the waitress with the kid, the schematics, the whole 9 yards. You do this right, and I got a Certendirk-sized hole on the front page that needs filling. Her tone shifted slightly. But listen, be careful. Anytime you deal with these wackadoodles, I get nervous. Last thing I want is for you to end up in the back of a van with a sack over your head. Peter appreciated the concern, even if it came wrapped in Mary's usual dramatic flair. He drove back to the diner to ask Luann the question that had been nagging him since the courthouse. Who do you think is watching you? He asked when she came to his booth. She answered without irony. Aliens. They come back all the time. Hover over the trailer, poke around Liam when he's sleeping. Polite about it, though. Never leave a mess. You've seen them? Nah, they got some way of keeping you from waking up proper, but I can tell. Always leave the same weird smell afterward. Only ever smell it when they've been snooping around. Peter asked about the guys in the black SUVs he'd noticed parked down the street. Yeah, them too. Always parked down there with their stupid sunglasses. Who wears sunglasses at night? Gotta be working with the aliens. Makes sense, don't it? Science and paperwork, 2 halves of the same scam. Peter struggled with the logic. If they're watching you, why be so obvious about it? Luan looked at him like he was missing something fundamental. They don't care if anyone laughs at me. That's the point. Makes the truth easier to hide when the person telling it looks crazy. Peter stared at her, unsettled by how much sense that actually made. Go on then, she said. Write your story. Maybe this time they'll say hello. That night, Peter parked his rental car down the road from the trailer and settled in to watch. The desert stretched endlessly in all directions, and the constant deafening sound of cicadas filled the air, a blanket of noise that made it impossible to hear anything else approaching. Near midnight, the cicadas stopped. The sudden silence hit Peter like a physical blow. In the oppressive quiet, he could hear his own heartbeat, his breathing, the slight whistle of wind through his partially open window. A figure stood at Luann's fence, barely visible in the darkness. It didn't move, didn't gesture, just stood there like a sentinel. Peter's phone vibrated. Toby's voice was barely a whisper. They're watching your phone, Pete. Mine too. Somehow they've blocked me from my usual sources. You need to go analog and stay that way. When Peter looked back at the fence, the figure was gone. He stepped out of the car, but before he could investigate, the cicadas resumed their deafening chorus with jarring suddenness, as if someone had flipped a switch. The oppressive noise surrounded him, and Peter rushed back to his car, unnerved by how the desert's natural order seemed to respond to what? Alien presence? Government surveillance? He drove back to his motel with more questions than answers. Peter woke to sunlight streaming through the blinds and the smell of coffee. Coffee he hadn't made. The man sat calmly in the motel chair, sipping from Peter's mug like he owned the place. He was exactly what central casting would order for government operative. Short-cropped hair, nondescript black suit, and the kind of expressionless face you'd forget 5 minutes after meeting. How did you get in here? Peter asked, trying to play off his shock. Through the door. It was locked. The man scoffed and nodded at the quaint notion of a lock. He set down the mug and leaned back, completely at ease. Luann Masters was abducted 9 years ago, Mr. Certendirk. She was artificially impregnated as part of an experimental breeding program that has since been abandoned. 10 women, 10 men, 10 very special children. Peter sat up, suddenly wide awake. You're telling me aliens are running breeding experiments? We're running them, Mr. Certendirk. Past tense. The goal was to optimize human DNA, accelerate our evolution. We agreed because, to be honest, we didn't have a choice. Those children will grow up to be leaders in science, philosophy, medicine. One of them will cure cancer. Another will solve our energy crisis. These children will get humanity out of the mess we've made, and they'll be celebrated for it. The man's tone remained conversational, like he was discussing the weather. Is that why Liam's DNA tests had such unusual results? Peter asked. You tell me. The man's smirk sent a chill down Peter's spine. How can you justify this cruelty? Peter's voice cracked slightly. The greater good, Mr. Certendirk. Sometimes difficult choices must be made for the benefit of all mankind. Peter felt his journalistic instincts kick in, even as his brain struggled with the impossibility of the conversation. And what about consent? What about basic human rights? The man stood and smoothed his jacket with bureaucratic precision. Tell the world if you like. Mary Clatch will gut it of any value, like she always does. Even if she doesn't, no one but conspiracy nuts will believe you. And those are the people we let find the truth. They discredit themselves. He moved toward the door, then paused. Print the truth, Certendirk. See how far it gets you. The door clicked shut behind him, leaving no threat hanging in the air, only a dare. Peter spent the rest of the day paranoid and jumpy, checking over his shoulder and second-guessing every black sedan on the road. When he went to leave town that evening, something felt wrong with his car. Crouching by the wheel well, he found fresh tool marks scratched clean through the desert grime. The tracking device was small and sleek, magnetically clamped beneath the chassis, its tiny red light blinking steadily like a mechanical heartbeat. Peter stared at it for a long moment, chilled. This wasn't a message. It was a reminder. They didn't need to chase him. They already knew where he was, always would. He'd been neutralized from an exposure standpoint, but they wanted to keep him frightened, asking the wrong questions. It was nearly midnight when Peter arrived at Luann's trailer. The cicadas were as loud as ever, their familiar wall of sound almost comforting now. He pushed open the unlocked door and stepped inside. Liam's drawings were everywhere, pinned to the refrigerator, taped to the walls, scattered across the kitchen table like proud displays of a gifted child's work. Mathematical equations mixed with crayon drawings of spaceships and dinosaurs. Then it happened. The cicadas stopped. Complete silence fell over the desert like a suffocating blanket. Peter froze, fear crawling up his spine. He ventured outside into the oppressive quiet, expecting to see headlights or black SUVs, but the night was empty of everything except stars. Then he looked up. There, above him, was a hole in the sky, a patch of absolute black where no stars shone, something massive and silent hovering overhead, blotting out constellations without making a sound. It lingered for what felt like an eternity, then glided away without warning, leaving a swirl of dust in its wake as if the desert itself had exhaled. Peter's hands shook as he called Luann. She answered immediately, her voice tight with panic. They're coming back, she said. They're not taking him again. Not again. She told him they were hiding at the abandoned UFO mini-golf course outside town. Peter raced to the mini-golf course, his beat-up car's engines straining against the desert roads. He found Luann's Honda in the parking lot, but the course itself was empty. He called out, searched behind every ridiculous alien statue and tin-clad UFO, but found nothing. Then the cicadas started up again, their constant noise resuming as if whatever presence had silenced them was finally gone. Racing back to the trailer, Peter found the signs of hurried departure, empty closets, open drawers, missing clothes. The refrigerator and walls, once decorated with Liam's drawings, were stripped bare. The only thing remaining was a single drawing on the kitchen table. Peter picked it up with trembling hands. It showed Luann and Liam holding hands as they boarded a black, disc-shaped craft. Above them was nothing but dark sky, empty of stars. Peter filed his story from the motel room, pouring every detail, every conversation, every impossible moment into his laptop. He sent it to Mary Clatch with a note explaining that this was the most important story he'd ever written. Her response came back within hours, and Peter watched his careful investigation transform into sensational garbage. Roswell Waitress pregnant with E.T.'s Lovechild. When he called to protest, Mary's voice was cheerful and dismissive. No one wants the truth, Pete. They just want a headline that makes them laugh while they're buying groceries. Peter stared at his laptop screen for a long time, then quietly saved all his photos, interview notes, and copies of Liam's schematics into a hidden folder labeled Grandma's Recipes. His finger hovered over the delete key for the original files, then he closed the laptop without pressing it. Peter sat alone on the hood of his car in the desert night, miles from town. He held Liam's final drawing, the image of mother and child boarding the UFO, and studied it in the starlight. Above him, thousands of stars shone across the clear desert sky. One more story they'll never believe, Peter said quietly to the empty night. He folded the drawing carefully and slipped it into his jacket pocket next to his press badge and his dying dreams of serious journalism. Tomorrow he'd drive back to the city, back to his cubicle at the Stranger Times, back to chasing down reports of Elvis sightings and haunted laundromats. But tonight, he sat under the stars and listened to the silence, wondering if somewhere out there, an 8-year-old boy was still trying to figure out how to make them less sad.